Could a break be coming in the search for Nancy Guthrie? We just got a statement from the FBI related to a glove being tested for DNA they say appears to match the glove of the man on the front steps of the 84-year-old's house around the time she was taken. How big of a deal could this be when it comes to cracking a case that is...
This is the moment investigators wait for, because DNA doesn't guess. It either hits or it doesn't. But here's the catch. A single glove doesn't solve kidnapping. It only opens the first real door.
Entering its third week. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. It's 15 days ago that Nancy Guthrie went to her daughter's house for dinner and some games, a typical family night. Then a family member drove her home to her house where she lives alone, not that far away. And then in the early hours of the morning, she was allegedly taken, and we have not seen her since. We don't know who the man is in this video that was released by the FBI, that masked man armed with a gun, wearing a backpack with gloves on his hands. Now, we just got a statement from the FBI about a glove that was recovered in the search for Nancy Guthrie. Now, I want to read this statement for you first, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it could mean. Quote, "The gloves found approximately 2 miles from the Guthrie residence in a field near the side of the road were packaged up by Pima County Sheriff's deputies and sent overnight on Thursday, February 12th, and they arrived at a private lab in Florida on Friday. That would be February 13th. This is the private lab that the Pima County Sheriff's Department uses in Florida for DNA analysis of evidence they get. And the statement goes on to say the FBI received preliminary results on Saturday, February 14th, and now they're awaiting quality control and official confirmation today. This is Sunday, before putting unknown male profile into CODIS. Now, CODIS is the national database for the FBI. The process typically takes 24 hours from when the Bureau receives DNA. Investigators collected approximately 16 gloves in the various areas near Nancy Guthrie's home. Most of them were searchers' gloves that they discarded in various areas when they searched the vicinity. The one with the DNA profile recovered is different and appears to match the gloves of the subject in the surveillance video. The FBI has and will continue to provide assistance on whatever timeline is provided to us." End quote. So there is a lot there. This could potentially be a glimmer of hope in this case. You hear that line, the one with the DNA.
That line right there is doing a lot of work. Appears to match. In legal terms, that's not proof. That's positioning. Law enforcement is signaling progress without overpromising, and that usually means they're guarding against disappointment.
The profile recovered is different and appears to match the gloves of the subject in the surveillance video. That is the line that stood out to us. Now, it's also important to note that the FBI is still labeling the person you see in the video as unknown male. The spokesperson also said that when you look at the video, it appears the person on surveillance on Nancy Guthrie's front porch is wearing nitrile gloves pulled over another pair of gloves. So nitrile gloves, they're like an alternative to latex gloves. They are very common. They could be used for cleaning homes, could be used if someone has some sort of, PPE on. So I think there's important context there as we await these DNA results. But once the FBI gets the official confirmation, they're then going to put the DNA profile into their national database. It's called CODIS, to see if anything comes back. Now, this database, it has DNA profiles from convicted offenders, people who were arrested or detained, people who have had previous run-ins with law enforcement. So if the FBI ends up having the DNA profile of who they believe that masked person is, and look, that is a big if.
This is where cases like this get dangerous in a court of public opinion. A glove on the roadside could be evidence, or it could be coincidence. And if investigators jump too fast, defense attorneys jump even faster.
Know what's going to come of this. They could get a match if that person has their DNA in the system already. Now, it's unclear, looking at what the FBI spokesperson said, is there anything about the glove that they found in the field that makes them believe it is related to the Guthrie investigation and it's not just a glove that someone littered on the side of the road? Is by saying it appears to be the same glove, do they mean that that just is the similar style of glove that you see on video? The Pima County Sheriff, when he has been asked about gloves that have been gathered as evidence, he says none of the gloves were found inside of Nancy Guthrie's home or on her property. He also has not said what evidence they have found inside Nancy Guthrie's home. However, he did say that DNA other than Nancy Guthrie's was found inside of her house. It's unclear if that DNA belongs to the masked person that you see outside her home and what specifically the evidence is that had the DNA. But another piece of context here is it could just be a friend of hers, could be someone who she goes to church with, could be someone that she hires to help her around the house. We do know that gardeners, pool cleaners, hired help, they have been asked to provide DNA samples in this investigation. Law enforcement has detained at least 2 people in this case, but no arrests have been made. Some important context on that being provided today. A new report says that law enforcement is, quote, leaning away from calling the man whose home they searched on Friday night as a suspect. The man's home was searched with a federal search warrant, and also law enforcement made a traffic stop at a nearby Culver's fast food restaurant. That man wasn't arrested. It's unclear why law enforcement zeroed in on this home that's about 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's house. It's also unclear what was it about the vehicle that made them want to pull this person over and talk to them and search their vehicle. But again, when it comes to search warrants, law enforcement had to provide something to this judge for them to sign off on the warrant to carry out this operation. Now, on top of that, NBC News is reporting.
Here's the Walmart connection, and this is not random. Retail data has cracked major cases before. When investigators start naming product brands, it usually means purchase histories and surveillance footage are already being quietly reviewed.
That investigators are leaning away from Nancy Guthrie's family members, any relatives, as potential suspects in this case. The sheriff has said that nobody's been ruled out officially, though, until a kidnapper is arrested. Now, as local and federal law enforcement continue to wait on these DNA results, they say that they will continue to follow leads in this case, including what that suspect was wearing on the night he was outside of Nancy Guthrie's home, specifically that backpack that looks full. We don't know what's in the backpack, but we do know at this point what law enforcement believe it is: a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack backpack. And the only place you can get it is Walmart. On top of that, Fox News is reporting that the holster you see on the front side of the suspect, it appears to be a cheap one. It's a Strategy brand hip holster, Fox believes, and it is available at Walmart. You can get it for about $10, and there's 5 Walmart stores that reportedly have them in the Tucson area. This would not be the first time that Walmart, its sales records, and surveillance video played a major role in a high-profile investigation. These are images of quadruple murderer Brian Koberger at a Walmart in Pullman, Washington in 2022. He reportedly made 13 trips between October and December of 2022. He killed those 4 University of Idaho students inside their house on November 13th. Law enforcement was looking at what he bought at Walmart as they were trying to track down where he purchased the K-bar knife that he used in the murders. Now, in the search for Nancy Guthrie, law enforcement is still hoping that they can find her, and a key part of that could be her pacemaker. You might remember the timeline that was given to us by law enforcement. Her device disconnects from her iPhone at 2:28 in the morning. It was also reportedly synced to her Apple Watch. Her iPhone and Apple Watch were found in her home on that morning that she was taken. And now it appears that law enforcement is using some pretty high-tech equipment to try and see if they can pick up a trace of that pacemaker. Media members have noticed a helicopter flying low over Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, and News Nation is reporting that is because they are using what's called a signal sniffer on a helicopter in hopes it picks up that pacemaker. Now, to use this device, you have to fly low and slow over a particular area. Private investigator Steve Fisher, who often comes on this show, posted some context about this equipment on X, about how it works, because he's used it in multiple searches for missing people. Steve says this device can pick up a range of signals like Wi-Fi.
Releasing surveillance images feels powerful, but it's a gamble. You get tips, yes. You also warn the suspect. And once that happens, evidence disappears, mistakes get corrected, and the clock starts working against investigators.
cellular data, radio frequency emissions, and even emissions coming from a pacemaker. He says you do have to fly very low to the ground, and this is not something that you can use to like sweep an entire city. It has to be a defined area. Now, in his experience, the 3 cases where he used it, they did not have success, but that does not mean it could not work in the search for Nancy Guthrie. The FBI has doubled the amount of money it is offering as a reward for information leading to Nancy Guthrie or the person or people who took her from her home. It's now at $100,000. Law enforcement's also received thousands of tips in this case, and a lot of them have come in after the surveillance images were released by FBI Director Kash Patel on social media. And look, you look at those images, it is incredibly compelling. It puts a face to the monster that would be behind taking Nancy Guthrie, a masked monster at this point. But we'll talk in a moment about why releasing those images when the FBI did may have been a mistake in this investigation. Now, as this investigation continues on, law enforcement is really leaning on the public to provide them surveillance video. Thursday afternoon, the Pima County Sheriff put out a call to people with home surveillance cameras like a Nest or a Ring that they want video from January 1st through February 2nd of 2026 of a 2-mile radius of this part of town, East Skyline Drive and North Campbell Avenue. And they say they want anything that shows vehicles, traffic, pedestrians, or suspicious activity. Nancy's home is about a 4-mile drive south of that intersection. And they also say they're reaching out to people with cameras on the Neighbors app. So if you're watching this and you get a request on the Neighbors app from someone saying they're law enforcement, it should have a blue check mark so you know it's legit. There's also a link that the sheriff's department's put out on X where you can submit videos as evidence. Now, previously, law enforcement reportedly was looking for video at very specific times, not just the entire month from January to February, but KVOA says that people in the Catalina foothills area of Tucson are asked to turn over any surveillance camera footage they have at very specific times. One is January 11th. That's roughly 22 days before Nancy Guthrie was taken, between 9 p.m. and midnight. Also, they're looking for footage from the morning of January 31st between 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. That's because they say there was a suspicious vehicle in the area at around 10 o'clock in the morning. They haven't said what that vehicle may look like, but we do know they went to that Circle K early on in this investigation, one that is near Nancy Guthrie's house, looking for surveillance video related to a vehicle of interest, they said. But, you know, the vehicle part of it may be an example of, from the public's perspective, we don't know as much as maybe we think we know when it comes to this case. Now, when you look here, this is the new missing persons poster that was put out by the FBI once the reward money was doubled to $100,000. If you have any information on Nancy Guthrie, contact the Pima County Sheriff at 520-351-4900. And you can also contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. Joining us now to talk more about this case is Dan Bruner, retired FBI special agent. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law and Crime as we continue to follow the search for Nancy Guthrie. So I know that we're kind of parsing through some of the media reports coming out about particular pieces of evidence, specifically some gloves. I believe it was a pair of gloves found roughly 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. How exactly could this factor into the case? How do you figure out whether or not this glove might actually be the person we see in that surveillance video on the front steps?
And that won't be done until those gloves in the video are recovered. So we don't know that the gloves recovered on the side of the road are the ones that that individual wore. The only way that we are going to definitively say that those gloves that discovered on the side of the road belong to the individual will be when that individual is captured and his DNA is compared to the DNA that's recovered inside the gloves. Until that time, this is just a clue. It provides us information. They have DNA that, they recovered from the interior of the glove. That DNA will be provided to laboratories for analysis and then will be entered into CODIS for comparison to DNA that is currently inside the system, which maintains all DNA. Every individual that is arrested federally, that is taken into custody, not questioned, is taken into custody, receives a DNA swab. That DNA swab is then submitted into this database, which is kept for future references. If that individual had previous interactions with federal authorities, it doesn't matter if it was FBI, DEA, HSI, if he had previous arrest through federal authority, that DNA swab from the glove will be discovered, and then they will find it and we'll be able to get an ID. Again,
this is the hardest truth in missing person cases. One clue is never the smoking gun. Prosecutors don't build cases on single hits. They build them on patterns. And right now, this glove is just one thread.
That still does not definitively say that the individual in the video is the individual that has the gloves. That individual who has the DNA that was found on the gloves on the side of the road could easily have just been working that day. And yes, he had been arrested in the past. If he matches the description, then once that clue is provided, okay, we have an individual who matches the physical description and we have the gloves. Where does he reside? All right, that'll give us the probable cause to conduct a search warrant at his residence based on the DNA CODIS from the gloves, and the gloves appear to match the ones that are in the video. His physical description, 5'9", 5'10", medium build, happens to match the video. That would be enough for, I believe, a federal judge to authorize a search warrant. Then a search warrant will be conducted at the house. If they find the backpack, if they find the clothes, the face mask, other material that may have been used in the furtherance of a crime, then that all will be put together as part of evidence in a court proceeding, and to take to court and charge him with any other federal crimes. But it's just one of the pieces. It's definitely not the smoking gun, but it's one of the pieces.
There's so much speculation in this case, as we all know, and it just seems like it's getting more and more by the day. It's getting exhausting, frankly. It's 15 days into this, and it seems like when there's silence from law enforcement, I know the sheriff has been giving interviews, but not really doing news conferences anymore. The speculation seems to be, getting larger. How would you characterize how this investigation has gone, just as someone who knows how investigations like this work?
Well, I think the investigation until this point had been going very well. I think Pima County, may have released the scene, I think, a little bit too quickly. I think they, had the scene, and we've already talked about this, and Pima County Sheriff has already stated, maybe he was a little quick to release it, and everyone understands that. But that's part of, after action reports. That's part of, delving into an investigation. That should have been held on to. That should have been for further analysis. Pima County, I'm sure their evidence response teams are excellent, but really no one is as good as the FBI's evidence response team, their analysis teams, their collection teams. The people on the ground, the evidence response team, are bar none second to, one of the best in the world. And having them brought in, and it would have been just as easy as to asking them, hey, could you come in and back us up? Eventually, a federal investigation was opened, and that's when the FBI said, okay, we need the scene back. That's where we had what happened last week. The investigation was progressing, moving forward, and I think that it was a little bit of a stall. I did think a little bit of a stall, but with amazing work by our CAST, the Cellular Analysis Surveillance Team, CAST, which is agents and support employees who take cellular analysis, they take digital evidence, and they really, really understand and break it down as to the core, and then provide that as physical evidence. CAST team in Arizona was working with the Nest servers because Ms. Guthrie was not recording it. So they were looking into the possibility of recovering the lost data in the video in the servers. They were successful. Now, here's where there was a screw up and a mess up by the FBI. FBI leadership, and I'm assuming this came from Director Patel, is they decided to release the video. Now, one of the things I said, I was literally live on the air with one of your counterparts when the video was released. I was providing on-air commentary, and one of the first things I said was, I'm sure the FBI has had this a number of days to analyze it, to break it down, to look at every single evidence, little bit of evidence in that video before they give it to the public. So I'm thinking that they've had it 2 to 3 days. What happened in the next day or two? You saw the tent getting popped up for height analysis. Then you saw the backpack being identified. Mm-hmm. That, to me, was clear to me that this was being done after the release. There is no FBI agent, no team member, no evidence response, no CAST individual. As a case agent for 20 years, there's no way I would want that information, that video released to the public. Number one reason is I haven't had a chance to break it down. Maybe there's something in there that I could identify and realize what store that was bought. And then at the store, they can give us surveillance video, and then we can identify a subject of interest without them knowing that we are following them, without them knowing. This put the advantage by releasing that video. Kash Patel decided to release that video for whatever reason, public relations reasons, to say the FBI is doing a great job. We don't need that sort of public relations win. But Kash Patel decided to do it. He then gave the advantage back to the criminal. Why? Because once that criminal knows, what is the criminal going to do? Get rid of the backpack, get rid of the face mask, get rid of the jacket, get rid of the gun. All pieces of clear evidence that a U.S. attorney would want in court, or state attorney, a DA, would want in court to prove this was recovered at his home. Here's the video of him, disabling the Ring doorbell camera.
Right.
That individual now also can flee. He could be on the other side of the planet at this time because he says, oh no, they have me on video. You're giving the advantage to them. This completely was a huge headache to investigators. It didn't give them the opportunity. Then on top of all of this, before they were able to really dissect the backpack and analyze it and figure out this was the make, these are the stores, this would take at least 4, 5, 6 days, right?
Yeah.
In that time, in those first 3 days, 14,000 tips were given. 14,000 tips were provided, inundating the FBI with tips. And that required every single one of those tips had to be vetted, had to be worked out. If the investigators had their time to vet it out, okay, we're looking for an individual who's 5'10", who's wearing this type of backpack. We know that this backpack is sold at this store. That would have been 14,000, would have been much less number of tips, and would not have inundated the system. Those FBI agents in Arizona, those analysts, those support employees, they're working their butts off. And by releasing that video too soon, Kash Patel created an inordinate amount of extra work for that case team where they don't need to be doing that. That was a mistake, 100%, no doubt about it, that I'm sure that every case agent, everyone down in the field was complete disagreement with.
Because you look at a couple instances where we've seen people who have been detained and then released, where you have the gentleman by the U.S.-Mexico border whose name was Carlos, and that was a tip that came in, and someone said, hey, I think you should look at this guy, and then the mother-in-law of the house was saying that, when the SWAT team entered the home, they were holding up pictures and saying, is this your son-in-law? And she said no. And then you have the other night at the home about 2 miles from where Nancy Guthrie lives, you also have this traffic stop. I think the jury might still be out on whether there was information, I guess publicly, that was taken from that house that could be of value to the investigation. But what do you make knowing that those tips are coming in, and we've seen to this point at least 2 people be detained and questioned by law enforcement and then be released?
I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem with someone being detained and questioned based on a tip. I'm curious as to seeing the writing in the affidavit for the search warrant, because to get a search warrant for a house, you need to have probable cause to believe that that house has evidence of the crime. Having that tip either had to be extremely specific, or just having a tip that says, oh, I believe this guy, X guy, did it. That to me is pretty weak. But if they were able to obtain a federal search warrant based upon that, I'm curious to see, what the probable cause was to execute a search warrant. But I have no problem with them detaining and questioning individuals. But again, this goes back to when the video was released.
Right.
If the teams had time to it, we wouldn't be running in 10 different directions like a chicken with your head cut off, stopping people, detaining people. It would have been much more focused, hyper investigation. Not to mention, if they had been able to determine, and they'd squeezed it for all it's worth, all the juice out of that video, and then determine a subject, that person wouldn't know that they're being watched. Now they're going to look over their left shoulder, over their right shoulder, because they think that the FBI is coming for them. So again, I have no problem with them stopping and detaining people and questioning them and releasing them. So that's part of the investigation.
And I'm sure in your career, you've looked at countless Ring doorbell cameras, Nest cameras, as those have become more popular, surveillance videos of suspects. Now that we've all seen this video and you look at it, in terms of suspects you have seen on camera where you can take something from that video, how valuable, like specifically this person, what are the things you're extracting from that video when you watch it?
Well, it confirms what I was saying before the video was released, saying that This team or this group of people was amateurs. They're not professional criminals. They're not professional kidnappers. And I was saying that before because you don't kidnap. I mean, looking at talking to numerous counterparts of mine in the crisis negotiation team, is that you don't kidnap an 84-year-old woman with medical issues.
Right.
You don't. I mean, because if you're doing this for kidnap for ransom, she's got a week, maybe, if you didn't have her medication, maybe a week, maybe at best. You kidnap someone who's in their 40s, someone who's in their 30s. And on top of that, the communications, you sent it to local media stations, TMZ. There's not a clear communication route. You don't providing, a communication way back. Then with the video being released, it confirmed my theory that these were amateurs. He wore a very distinctive backpack. He wore a very distinctive shirt. He had a gun, a holster in a place where you're not supposed to hold a holster, right. A full size, maybe appendix carry would be inside the waistband at the quarter, but not directly in front of your crotch. And that's a full holster. So I saw that. I said, this guy's a wannabe criminal. He's not, he's not a professional at best. And he makes mistakes all the time. He's there for 41 minutes. He stood on the porch, I would guess about 3 to 5 seconds. Because if you look at the blood droplets, there was, those news cameras, when that scene was released, news cameras went up to the porch. You see the blood and it's droplets straight down. Okay. They weren't at an angle like she was being dragged or rushed out. There were droplets, boom, which means she was standing in place for probably like 3 to 5 seconds. I would guess bleeding from her hand or her arm, where her hand was just dripping just straight down. Again, they're standing on the porch. If these were professionals, they'd have her in and out. They'd be rushing in and out. If it was a home invasion, they would have gone in. They want to be in and out in minutes. If it was a home invasion gone bad, they probably would have hurt her and killed her and then just gotten out of there within minutes. So there's numerous things that to me indicated that these were not professional. These were not kidnappers that knew what they were doing. And like I said, I am waiting as the circle closes in on them. I would say that this is almost going to be to the point where it's not so much Pima County and the FBI finding this individual. It's going to be that individual making a mistake. And then them, like Luigi Mangione, taking his mask down for that 1 second. And then someone in the McDonald's recognizing him in Pennsylvania. It's just going to be one little mistake that they make, that they could have gotten away with it, but they're going to make a mistake because they're nervous, they're stressing. The more and more time this goes on, the less likely a positive outcome for Ms. Guthrie, but the more likely this individual is going to get tired and make a mistake.
Yeah, and that's the tough part because it's now 15 days and you do worry because her health. I know, in the beginning, the question was with her medication, if she doesn't have it in 24 hours, it could be fatal. And so, you really worry on that point of how it's going to play out. On the amateur part of it, because and I'm not a professional in law enforcement, but I looked at it and it's like, this is a guy who clearly didn't know the Ring doorbell camera or a Nest, was going to be there. And then he kind of the grabbing of the flowers, it seemed bizarre. Are you surprised that 15 days later, though, there hasn't been an arrest, knowing that this could be a very amateur group of people, that the mistake wasn't made to the point that, they would already have that person in custody?
I would, at this point right now, I was thinking that it was a group. I don't have a lot of confidence that those emails that were sent through TMZ was actually the group. I haven't seen the content of the emails, but supposedly there is something that states that they specifically knew the interior of the house. Listen, somebody who's, a DoorDash individual could see the inside of the house and state something, or you could walk through using Zillow. I advise all my clients, I do security consulting up here in Montana. I advise all my clients, take your houses off of Zillow, because then that individual is seeing the inside of your house. So for them to say something along those lines of saying, well, it could have gotten from Zillow. So I'm not so confident. I don't know about this, so I don't know the content of the emails. But yeah, at the beginning, I was thinking that these were a group of individuals, 2 or 3. I think at this point, I'm going more towards it's probably just one person, an individual, maybe one other actor, because the more time that goes on, the more nervous another person in the group, the weak link, will become so nervous that they're gonna make a mistake too. So I believe I'm saying the more time goes on, the smaller the group it is, because they are amateurs and they're not professionals.
And we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, now more than 2 weeks, you just hope that that resolution is closed. You still hold out hope. But with so many agents working on it, that, and I'm sure there's not a lot of sleep going on and a lot of people taking it personally, that they want to get this person brought to justice and figure out where Nancy Guthrie went. Dan Bruner, retired FBI special agent. Great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Anytime.